Still, the sunlight flashed off the resort pool as I stopped behind my husband, who'd kissed me goodbye for a business trip. As my grip tightened on my bag strap, I stayed quiet and watched his shoulders tense before he even turned around. While the water lapped steadily against the tile, the smell of his cologne mixed with sunscreen and told me the truth first. The same light caught my wedding ring, and I realized he hadn't just lied about where he was. He'd lied about who I was to him. That's when it became clear the betrayal wasn't the woman beside him, but the confidence with which he used my trust. Still standing there, I let my lawyer step forward and chose paperwork over tears. Before we start, I'd love to hear where you're watching from. If you enjoy the story, please hit like, subscribe, and join our community. It really helps us grow. Morning light spilled across the kitchen counter in a pale, cold stripe, landing directly on Derek's open suitcase like it was under interrogation. He stood over it, folding shirts too quickly, hands moving with a practiced impatience that didn't match the quiet of the house. The coffee maker hummed behind me, filling the room with the bitter smell of burnt grounds, but he hadn't poured himself a cup. He didn't look at me either. Every time I shifted my weight or cleared my throat, his shoulders tightened. It was like my presence alone was an accusation. "Early flight," he said, without being asked. "Business trip." The words came out flat, rehearsed. Business trip. He said it the way some people say, amen, like once it was spoken, the conversation was over, sealed, unquestionable. He zipped one side of the suitcase halfway, then stopped to slide his phone off the counter and angle it under the table. His thumb moved fast, too fast. I leaned against the fridge, the metal cold through my robe. "Which city again?" He exhaled, sharp and theatrical, like I'd asked something unreasonable. "Claire," he said, dragging my name out. "We've been over this." "Have we?" I searched my memory and came up empty, but I nodded anyway because that's what I'd learned to do lately. Accept the version of reality he handed me and swallow the rest. He glanced up just long enough to frown. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" "Getting anxious." He shook his head, a small dismissive smile tugging at his mouth. "It's exhausting. You know that, right?" There it was, the familiar microcut, not loud enough to call cruelty, just precise enough to bleed. My chest tightened, heat creeping up my neck, but I forced my face to stay neutral. If I reacted, I'd prove his point. If I didn't, I'd disappear a little more. "I'm just asking," I said quietly. He was already back on his phone. The zipper finally closed with a harsh metallic rasp that echoed too loudly in the room. He lifted the suitcase onto the counter to check the pockets, brushing past me without touching me, like we were strangers sharing space instead of spouses sharing a life. His cologne lingered, clean, expensive, wrong for a Monday morning. "I can drive you," I said, because offering still felt safer than accusing. "Save you the parking hassle." He snapped his head up. "No." The word came out sharp, instant like a reflex. His eyes widened immediately after, and I watched him correct himself in real time. His shoulders dropped. He forced a laugh. "I mean, no, it's fine," he said, softer now. "I'll just Uber. Meetings start the second I land. It's easier." "Easier for who?" The question sat heavy on my tongue, but I swallowed it. He leaned in and kissed my cheek, quick and careful, like a formality. His lips were cool. There was no coffee on his breath, no urgency, just distance. "Don't spiral," he added, grabbing his jacket. "Okay?" The door clicked shut behind him a minute later, the sound final and hollow. I stood there longer than I should have, listening to the quiet rush back into the house. The coffee maker clicked off. Somewhere down the street, a car alarm chirped twice and went silent. I moved on autopilot, wiping the counter, straightening a chair that hadn't been moved. His suitcase was gone, but the space it left felt loud. Something tugged at me then, not a thought, more like a physical pull, a wrongness I couldn't name. I went to the coat rack where he'd tossed his suit jacket and slid my hand into the pocket, expecting nothing. My fingers brushed against something smooth and solid, plastic, warm like it had been held recently. I pulled it out. It wasn't a boarding pass, not a receipt. It was a resort wristband card, Thick, sleek, branded with a minimalist logo and a soft ocean blue stripe. The kind you wear to charge drinks to a room without pulling out your wallet. The kind you don't get on business trips. I turned it over in my palm, my heartbeat suddenly loud in my ears. It still held his heat. I could smell sunscreen faintly, citrusy and sweet, nothing like airports or conference rooms. I stood alone in the kitchen, morning light still cutting across the counter, and understood something without wanting to. Today, I know this was the moment my body learned the truth before my mind could argue it away. I sat at the kitchen table long after the coffee went cold, the resort card still resting beside my phone like it was watching me. The house felt too quiet, every tick of the wall clock landing heavy in my chest. I told myself there was a rational explanation. There always was. Derek was good at providing them. I typed the message slowly, deleting and retyping until it looked harmless enough. "Which hotel are you at?" I hit send and stared at the screen, my reflection faint in the dark glass. 1 minute passed, then 2. The 3 little dots never appeared. My eyes started to ache, that dry burn you get when you forget to blink. Finally, my phone buzzed. "Stop interrogating me." No greeting, no answer, just that. A statement that made me feel like I'd committed some kind of offense by wanting to know where my husband was sleeping. Another vibration followed immediately, almost like an afterthought. A red heart emoji. I let out a shaky laugh that surprised me with how thin it sounded. He did this sometimes. Wrap dismissal in affection, like if he softened the edges enough, I'd stop noticing the blade. I placed the phone face down, then flipped it back over a second later, unable to leave it alone. A photo came through. It was a selfie of Derek from the chest up, wearing his navy blazer, mouth tilted into the smile he used on clients. At the airport, the caption read, I zoomed in without meaning to. The glass behind him reflected light that didn't belong to terminals and TSA lines, palm trees, bright, unmistakable fronds cutting across a blue sky. The sunlight was too warm, too direct. Airports were gray and fluorescent and tired. This was none of those things. My stomach dropped. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred, my thumb tracing the edge of the screen like I could rub the truth into focus. Maybe it was an ad behind him, maybe a mural, maybe I was overthinking it like he always said. I called him. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Each ring felt louder than the last, like it was echoing inside my ribs. It went to voicemail without him declining it, just silence, then his recorded voice, cheerful, professional, nothing like the man who'd snapped at me an hour earlier. I hung up before the beep. A text arrived almost immediately, in meetings all day. That was it. No explanation for the missed call, no follow-up, just a boundary drawn in 4 words. I imagined him typing it with one hand, distracted, already done with me. I pressed my palm flat against the table, grounding myself in the cool wood. My throat felt tight, like I'd swallowed something too big. My fingers were cold, even though the house was warm. I noticed my breathing had gone shallow, quick little sips of air that didn't seem to reach my lungs. Don't spiral, I told myself, using his words against my own panic. You're being sensitive. You always do this. I walked to the sink and ran hot water over my hands, watching the steam rise. I counted my breaths the way my therapist once taught me. In for 4, out for 6. My phone buzzed again and my heart jumped so hard it hurt. It was nothing, a work email, the kind that required no emotion at all. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes, the smell of dish soap sharp and clean. My mind kept replaying his message, stop interrogating me, over and over, like a verdict. I wondered when asking a question had become an accusation, when curiosity had turned into a character flaw. Today I understand that this was the moment he wanted me to doubt myself more than I doubted him. The notification came through while I was sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to work. My laptop was open, email glowing back at me, but I wasn't reading anything. I was listening to the house. Too quiet, refrigerator humming, the faint tick of the clock above the stove. Then my phone vibrated against the wood. Resort deposit, pending. I stared at it for a long second, like my brain needed time to translate. Deposit, resort. The merchant name followed. Unmistakably luxury, the kind of place that offered ocean view upgrades and signature scents pumped into the air. My chest tightened. I opened our banking app, the screen bright and clinical. The charge sat there calmly, like it belonged. A few $100s, labeled as travel, neat, sanitized, lying without raising its voice. I called the bank. After the usual menu and a stretch of cheerful hold music, a woman answered. I explained what I was seeing, my voice careful, measured. I could already feel myself shrinking, preparing to be told it was nothing. She spoke slowly, like she was choosing words for someone fragile. So, ma'am, a resort deposit is usually just a temporary authorization. It doesn't mean— I know, I interrupted, sharper than I meant to. I need to know how it was approved. Typing. A pause. It was authorized through a mobile device registered to your husband, she said, but it posted under your profile. My mouth went dry. Under my profile? Yes, your login credentials were used. I gripped the edge of the table. That familiar humiliation crept in. The assumption that I must have shared passwords carelessly, that I wouldn't understand the implications. I remembered Derek insisting months ago that consolidating everything under one profile was efficient. I'd stood there nodding, trusting him, letting him take control because he sounded so sure. I didn't authorize it, I said quietly. She acknowledged it politely, but I could hear the distance. Because on paper, it was my name, my digital signature, my responsibility. When I hung up, I printed the statement. The printer whirred, loud in the quiet kitchen, and the paper came out warm. The ink looked too dark, too permanent. Resort deposit authorized via mobile profile. Claire Morgan. Seeing my name there made my stomach twist, like someone had forged my handwriting in broad daylight and expected me to accept it. I stacked the paper neatly anyway. Something in me had gone still, focused. Panic wasn't helping. Documentation might. That's when I called Ava. She answered quickly. What's wrong? I need a favor, I said. Can you pull Derek's company expense policy? The real one. Travel, compliance, conflicts, everything. She didn't question me. I heard keys clicking almost immediately. There's a section on gift reporting and conflicts of interest, she said after a moment. And audits. Claire, they take this stuff seriously. My phone chimed with the PDF. Corporate language filled the screen. Cold, precise, unforgiving. Rules Derek knew better than anyone. Rules he'd assumed would never touch him. I looked back at the printed statement on the table, my name stamped beneath his lie. Today, I understand this was the moment his secret stopped being personal and started becoming provable. Receipts don't gaslight. They just wait. Miles' office smelled like leather chairs and warm printer toner, the kind of neutral, expensive calm that made everything feel serious the moment you stepped inside. The lights were soft but deliberate. No cozy lamps, just enough brightness to see clearly without feeling exposed. He didn't rush me. He didn't fill the silence. He just waited, hands folded on the desk, eyes steady like he wasn't afraid of whatever I was about to say. I sat across from him with my purse on my lap, fingers knotted in the strap. My phone felt heavy in my hand when I unlocked it. One by one, I slid things across the desk like evidence from a crime scene I hadn't known I was living in. The bank statements first. The resort deposit circled in red ink, my handwriting shaky but legible. Then screenshots, Derek's texts telling me to stop interrogating him, calling me anxious, dramatic, exhausting. Little sentences that had made me feel unstable in my own home. I added the screenshot showing the second device activation on our account, the one I hadn't recognized, the one Derek had brushed off months ago as a system glitch. Miles didn't react the way people usually did. No raised eyebrows, no sympathetic sigh. He just nodded occasionally, eyes tracking each page, each line. When he picked up a document, he held it carefully, like it mattered, like I mattered. At one point, he asked, Do you have a full list of your joint and individual accounts? The question landed harder than I expected. I think so, I said, then stopped. Heat crept into my face. No, not all of them. He waited. Derek handled most of that, I admitted. The words tasted awful. He said he was better with numbers, that it stressed me out, so he took over. Saying it out loud made my stomach twist. It sounded weak, smaller than I felt inside. I stared at the edge of his desk, at a tiny scratch in the wood, anywhere but his face. Miles didn't smile. He didn't judge. He simply nodded, like this was information, not a confession. That's more common than you think, he said evenly, and it's not a moral failure. It's a control pattern. Control pattern. The phrase echoed in my head. He leaned back slightly and began explaining things the way someone does when they expect you to understand. Not slowly, not condescendingly, just clearly. He talked about documentation first. Dates, screenshots, originals, never editing files, keeping backups off shared devices. Then financial protection, a freeze on joint withdrawals, alerts rerouted to my phone only, temporary safeguards that didn't require permission or confrontation. He explained separation strategies, not emotional separation, but legal posture. What to say, what not to say. How silence could be safer than honesty with someone who weaponized information. Finally, he talked about confrontation. Private confrontations favor the person who lies well, he said. Public or witnessed conversations change the balance. Not loud, not dramatic, controlled, calm, with documentation. I pictured Derek's face when he was challenged, the way he smiled, the way he turned things around until I was apologizing for bringing them up. My chest tightened. What if he denies everything? I asked. He will, Miles said without hesitation. That's why proof matters more than emotion. The room felt very still then. I could hear the faint hum of the building's air system, the soft click of a keyboard somewhere outside the office. My heart was beating slower now, heavier, like it had found something solid to press against. Miles gathered the papers into a neat stack and looked at me directly. There's one question you need to answer before we decide next steps, he said. I braced myself, shoulders tightening. Do you want truth? He asked. Or do you want control back? The question sat between us, sharp and clean. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Truth was what I'd been chasing for weeks. Messages, clues, proof that I wasn't crazy. But control sounded like air after being underwater too long. I felt something shift in my chest, something quiet but decisive. Today, I understand this was the moment I stopped wanting him to admit the lie and started wanting my life back. Plush carpet swallowed the sound of my steps as I crossed the resort lobby. The air conditioning hit my arms too hard, raising goosebumps that had nothing to do with the cold. Everything smelled faintly of citrus and polished wood, the kind of place designed to make people feel carefree. Miles walked beside me, calm and unhurried, while my heart kept knocking against my ribs like it wanted out. The front desk glowed under soft lighting. Guests in linen and sunglasses leaned casually against the counter, laughing quietly. I waited my turn, feeling like I was about to interrupt something sacred. When we stepped forward, Miles asked for the front desk manager, his voice polite and controlled. Hannah appeared a moment later. Her name tag was straight, her smile practiced. I gave her Derek's name, my voice steady only because I forced it to be. She typed quickly, then slowed. Her eyes lifted from the screen to my face, and in that look I saw recognition, something between sympathy and warning. She hesitated before speaking. Are you expected? The question landed hard. Expected. Like I was a stranger trying to access a life that didn't belong to me. Heat crept into my face, humiliation sharp and immediate. I'm his wife, I said, quieter than I meant to. Hannah nodded once and turned the screen slightly away from the lobby. Mr. Morgan booked a romantic package, she said carefully. The billing contact is listed as Claire Morgan. My name sat there like a signature I hadn't written. And the room, she continued, is occupied by Mr. Morgan and Ms. Lane. The name felt foreign in my mouth when I repeated it. Ms. Lane. A woman I'd never met, existing fully inside my marriage without my consent. Miles stayed silent, letting the words do their damage. Hannah confirmed there was a second key card issued nightly. Frequent do not disturb. Spa appointments for 2, each detail stacked neatly on top of the last, forming something solid and undeniable. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a system working exactly as designed. The printer behind the desk began to hum, paper sliding out in quiet, efficient bursts. I watched it like I was watching proof materialize in real time. Around us, the lobby carried on. Laughter, rolling suitcases, glasses clinking somewhere out of sight. No one noticed me standing there, learning exactly how replaceable I'd been. I kept my posture straight, my face neutral, even as something inside me fractured and reformed into something harder. Now I understand this was the moment suspicion ended and certainty began. The lie didn't need his voice anymore. It had witnesses. The infinity pool glittered like a sheet of broken glass under the sun. The water was so blue it looked staged, like someone had adjusted the color until it felt unreal. Soft music thumped from hidden speakers, something upbeat and lazy, designed to make people forget what day it was. The air smelled like sunscreen and salt and sweet cocktails, the kind that came with tiny umbrellas and no consequences. My sandals sank slightly into the warm stone as I stepped out onto the pool deck. The heat rose through the soles into my bones, but the chill from the lobby still clung to my skin. I felt like my body was stuck between climates, cold with shock, hot with anger. Miles stayed beside me, half a step behind, not crowding, not pulling me back. He moved like a calm shadow, steady and quiet, as if he knew the smallest sudden gesture could crack me open. His presence was the only reason I didn't turn around and run, or collapse, or scream. I scanned the loungers, the cabanas, the clusters of laughing women with glossy hair, the men in sunglasses pretending not to stare. It all looked so normal. It was the kind of scene people posted online with captions like, "Blessed and needed this." It would have been easy to believe nothing ugly could exist in a place that clean. Then I saw him. Derek was stretched out on a lounger as if he'd earned it. One arm behind his head, the other resting near a sweating glass. Something amber with ice catching the light. His shirt was unbuttoned, not business casual, not conference ready. Vacation Derek. Reward Derek. The man who told me he was in meetings all day looked like he hadn't thought about meetings once. The sight of him didn't hit like a punch. It hit like ice water poured down my spine, instant numbness, instant clarity. Beside him, angled toward the sun like she belonged there, was Sloane. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look nervous. She looked curated. Sunglasses perched perfectly, hair pulled back in that effortless way that probably took an hour. Her skin glowed like she'd never cried in her life. She wore a swimsuit that was elegant and quiet and expensive, and she sat with her shoulders relaxed, posture open, like the world had always made room for her. And the humiliating part, the part my brain latched onto like a wound, was how familiar that confidence felt. I used to carry myself like that. Before I started apologizing for taking up space in my own house. Before Derek trained me to speak softer, ask less, accept more. Before I learned that if I wanted peace, I had to shrink. I felt my hands curl into fists at my sides, not because I wanted to fight her, because I wanted my old self back. Miles didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He let me set the pace, let me choose the moment. The music kept thumping softly. Someone laughed too loudly near the bar. A server walked by with a tray of drinks, the glass clinking faintly like tiny bells. My legs started moving before I gave them permission. Each step felt both slow and unreal, like walking through a dream I didn't want to be in. The closer I got, the more details sharpened. Derek's watch catching the sun, the white towel folded under his head, the faint scent of his cologne mixing with chlorine and coconut lotion. He hadn't noticed me yet. He was talking, smiling lazily, saying something that made Sloane tilt her head and laugh. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was intimate, familiar, like they had a private language. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. I could hear my own breathing, shallow and controlled, like I was trying not to make a sound that would give me away. Miles stayed just behind my shoulder, a calm anchor, a witness. I stopped a few feet away. For a second, I watched Derek like he was a stranger. This man had kissed my cheek that morning and told me not to spiral. This man had called me exhausting. This man had used my name to pay for his fantasy. And still, some part of me waited for the universe to correct itself. Then Derek looked up. His eyes found mine and his face did something strange. His smile started automatically. The same polished charm he used on neighbors and co-workers, like he was about to say, "Hey babe, what are you doing here?" It flickered on for half a second, and then it died, like a light switching off. The color drained from his face so quickly it was almost comical. His body stiffened against the lounger, the relaxed vacation posture snapping into alert panic. The glass near his hand trembled slightly as his fingers tightened. Sloane turned her head toward me, slow and curious, still smiling, until she saw his expression, until she realized this wasn't some playful surprise. And in that moment, standing in the sun with the music thumping and strangers laughing around us, I felt my heart turn to ice. Today I understand that betrayal doesn't always come with drama. Sometimes it comes with a smile that vanishes the second the truth walks up. Derek pushed himself up on the lounger so fast the towel under him bunched and slid. His sunglasses were still on, but I could see his eyes behind them, wide, frantic, trying to calculate what version of reality he could sell me in the next 5 seconds. "Claire?" he said, like my name was a mistake. Then his mouth pulled into a laugh that didn't reach anywhere real. What are you doing here?" The music kept thumping. A couple nearby clinked glasses. Someone splashed in the shallow end, squealing like this was the happiest place on earth. I stood still. My heart felt frozen, but my voice came out steady, almost calm. The calm surprised even me. "Hi," I said, looking directly at him. Then I turned slightly, just enough to include her. "I'm Claire, Derek's wife." The word wife didn't sound dramatic. It sounded factual, like stating the weather. Sloane's face stayed composed for half a second longer than it should have. Then her eyes moved over me in a slow, deliberate scan. My blouse, my sandals, the bag on my shoulder. Her gaze landed on my left hand. My ring. She looked at it the way someone looks at a price tag they didn't expect to see. Then she looked back up at my face, searching for something. Anger, hysteria, proof I was the crazy one Derek had probably described. Her smile twitched, trying to hold shape, but it didn't fit the moment anymore. Derek stood too. He adjusted his shorts like he was resetting his body into professional husband mode. His laugh came again, louder this time, meant for the air, meant for the people around us. Like if he performed confidence, the truth would feel less true. "Okay," he said, spreading his hands slightly. "Wow, this is a surprise visit." Surprise visit? Like I'd shown up with balloons. I watched him do it. How he tried to control the narrative in real time, making it sound like I was spontaneous and romantic instead of suspicious and right. It was the same trick he used in our kitchen, in our arguments, in every moment where my instincts threatened his image. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Miles stepped forward for the first time, just a half step, but it changed the temperature. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look angry. He looked focused, like he'd walked into a meeting he'd already prepared for. "We're here regarding misrepresentation and marital assets," he said. His tone was polite. Deadly in the way a scalpel is deadly. Clean, precise, not interested in feelings. Sloane's head tilted slightly like she was trying to place him. Her confidence flickered. Derek's jaw tightened. "What is this?" Derek asked, forcing another small laugh. "Seriously? You brought a lawyer to a pool?" Miles didn't blink. You used a joint account to fund this reservation. You listed my client as the billing contact, and you represented this trip as business-related." The words landed quietly, but they hit harder than yelling. Derek's face hardened, the charm struggling to hold. His gaze darted around, checking who might be listening. He leaned closer to me, lowering his voice to a hiss that was meant to feel intimate and controlling. "Not here," he whispered. "Claire, not here." Like he still got to decide where I was allowed to exist. Like the public setting was his, not mine. Like the embarrassment belonged to me. I didn't flinch. I held his gaze and felt something inside me steady. If he wanted secrecy, it was because secrecy had always been his shield. Sloane cleared her throat softly, trying to reclaim her role. "I'm sorry," she said, voice sweet, practiced. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Miles turned toward her with the same calm attention he'd given Derek. "For documentation," he said, "I'll need your full legal name." Her smile froze. The pause wasn't long, but it was loud. Loud enough that I heard it over the music, over the water, over my own breathing. She glanced at Derek, quick, almost pleading, and his eyes flicked away like he couldn't help her without implicating himself. She said, swallowing. Sloane Lane." Miles nodded as if he accepted it, then looked down at the folder in his hand. "Can you confirm the spelling?" he asked, still polite, still relentless. Her lips parted, then closed again. Her gaze darted to me, and for the first time I saw it. Fear. Not guilt. Fear of paperwork. Fear of names that matched forms. It's Sloane," she started, and then she changed it slightly, almost imperceptible. Sloane Lane. Different. Just enough different to be a lie. Miles looked up. The smallest pause. The slightest lift of his eyebrows. Derek's breath caught, and I felt it like a tremor in the air. Derek's first move wasn't apology. It wasn't explanation. It was control. He stepped closer, lowering his voice like we were having a normal married disagreement and not a public unraveling. "Claire," he said, tight and urgent, "let's go upstairs. We'll talk, privately." He reached for my elbow the way he always did when he wanted to steer me. Half touch, half claim. His fingers closed around me like ownership, like my body was a handle he could grab to redirect the scene. My skin crawled. I didn't move. I didn't pull away fast because I didn't want to look dramatic. That was the game he'd trained me into. If I reacted, I became the problem. His grip tightened just a fraction, and his mouth came close to my ear. His cologne mixed with chlorine and sunscreen, and it made my stomach flip. "You're embarrassing yourself," he hissed. "Not I'm sorry, not I messed up." It was like my humiliation was the crime here, like I was the one dragging something ugly into the light. His voice carried that familiar venom dressed as concern, the same tone that made me second-guess my own reality in our kitchen. I felt my throat tighten, but I kept my face still. My heart pounded hard enough that I could hear it over the music. Miles shifted beside me. No sudden movements, no confrontation. Just a calm repositioning, like a door closing. He stepped between Derek and me, angled his body so Derek couldn't reach me without making a scene. "That won't be necessary," Miles said evenly. Derek's hand froze on my elbow, then fell away as if he'd just been caught doing something indecent. His fingers flexed in the air for a second, empty. His eyes flashed with anger, not guilt, not shame, anger at being blocked. "Are you serious?" Derek snapped, louder now, careful enough to keep it sounding like frustration, not panic. "This is insane. Claire, tell him to—" "Stop," I said softly. The word surprised me with how calm it sounded. Derek blinked like he wasn't used to me interrupting him. Miles didn't linger. "We're going back to the front desk," he said. "We'll request copies of the folio, key card logs, and any associated bookings. Everything in writing." Derek scoffed, but his laugh came out thin. "You can't just— resorts don't—" "They do," Miles said, and kept walking. My legs moved, steady but not mine, carrying me away from the pool's glitter and toward the cool hush of the lobby. Behind us, the music faded. The laughter got muffled. The air inside hit my damp skin again, cold and clean, smelling like citrus and expensive soap. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Derek followed us into the small mirrored box like he still had a right. The carpet inside was plush and dark, swallowing sound. The mirror caught my face, pale, controlled, eyes too bright. Derek stood behind me, jaw tight, still performing wounded husband. As the elevator rose, he leaned in again, voice low. "You're making a mistake," he said. "This is going to ruin everything." Everything. His career, his image, his convenient life. Not my trust, not our marriage, not the fact that he'd used my name like a credit card. Miles stared straight ahead, hands folded, unbothered. The elevator dinged and the doors slid open into the lobby's soft light. At the front desk, Hannah's tired professionalism returned the second she saw us. Her expression didn't change much, but her eyes softened like she already knew why we were back. Miles requested copies. The folio with charges, keycard issuance history, spa bookings, any notes logged by staff, every paper trail that turned emotions into facts. Hannah nodded and began typing. The printer behind the desk hummed to life again, spitting out pages that felt like weapons made of ink. Derek hovered to the side, pretending he wasn't scared. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "Claire, can we please just talk like adults?" I didn't look at him. I watched the printer. I watched Hannah's hands. I watched the truth become tangible. When Hannah gathered the pages, Miles asked, "If necessary, would you be willing to notarize a statement confirming what the system shows?" Hannah paused. For the first time, her professional mask cracked just a little. "I've seen this before," she said quietly. Her voice held fatigue, not gossip. "If you need it, I can provide a statement. Notarization can be arranged." Her eyes met mine for a second, and in that brief contact, I felt something unexpected. Solidarity. Not pity. Just a woman who hated being part of this, but understood why she had to be. I took the documents with hands that didn't shake as much as they should have. The paper was warm from the printer, the ink crisp and unforgiving. Today, I know Derek didn't fear my emotions. He feared my evidence. The resort restaurant glowed with candlelight and ocean dusk, the kind of place where everything was softened on purpose. Voices low, jazz murmuring, servers moving like they'd been trained to never interrupt a mood. The air smelled like grilled citrus and expensive butter, and the windows held a darkening strip of sea like a calm backdrop for someone else's romance. Miles picked the table. Not hidden, not center stage, public enough for restraint, quiet enough for control. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, nails pressing into my palms to keep me present. Derek arrived late, wearing his calm like armor. He smiled at the host, nodded like a man walking into a normal dinner. Sloane sat beside him, posture stiff, dressed in soft neutrals like she was trying to blend into innocence. She didn't look at me right away. When she did, her eyes flicked to my ring and back up, quick and assessing. "Claire," Derek said, voice smooth, "this is a lot." He leaned forward slightly, keeping his tone gentle but loud enough for the nearby table to hear. "You're spiraling." The word hit like a slap, disguised as concern. I felt the heat rise in my face, humiliation first, then anger. He was building the same story he'd built at home. Unstable wife, reasonable husband. If the staff believed it, if strangers believed it, maybe I would start believing it again, too. "I'm not spiraling," I said, steady because I refused to give him the satisfaction. Derek sighed, patient, performative. "You brought a lawyer to a resort. You're making a scene." Miles didn't react. He didn't defend me emotionally. He simply opened the folder he'd brought and slid it across the table toward Derek. The soft scrape of paper on linen sounded louder than it should have. Inside were the resort folios, the bank statements, the keycard logs, the spa bookings, neat stacks of proof. A screenshot of a company card charge sat clipped to the top, highlighted, with policy excerpts underneath, conflicts of interest, misuse of funds, reporting requirements. Corporate language that didn't care how charming Derek was. Derek's eyes dropped to the pages. His smile twitched and tried to hold. "Okay," he said, forcing a laugh. "So what? You printed things out." Miles's voice stayed polite, almost gentle. "Our next steps are straightforward. We'll file immediate financial protections to prevent any new withdrawals or debt. And we'll notify your company's compliance department about potential misuse of funds and conflicts." The air changed. I watched it happen in Derek's face, how his confidence tightened, how his jaw flexed, how the word compliance landed harder than anything emotional ever could. He glanced around, checking who might be listening, then back at me. "You're going to ruin my career," he hissed softly, like his career was the injured party. Miles turned his attention to Sloane. "For the record," he said, "please confirm your full legal name." Sloane's smile slipped. She looked at Derek first, waiting for him to guide her, save her, control the moment. He didn't. He couldn't without implicating himself. She began, swallowing. Her fingers tightened around her water glass. The ice clinked. "Sloane? Lane." Miles held her gaze calmly. "Thank you. And you're aware you were billed under a room reserved by a married man whose spouse was listed as billing contact?" Sloane's composure cracked. "He told me you were separated," she blurted, voice shaking now. "He said it was basically over. He said you lived like roommates." The lie hung in the candlelit air, heavy and public. Derek's head snapped toward her, his mask slipping for a split second, anger flashing through the polish. And I sat there, watching his story collapse in front of witnesses who didn't know me, but could still recognize the truth when it finally had paperwork and a voice. Now I understand. Power shifts the moment the liar realizes the room no longer belongs to him. The hallway outside my room smelled like detergent and salt air, like the resort was constantly trying to scrub away anything human. The carpet was so thick my footsteps disappeared into it, and the only sounds were distant elevator chimes and the soft hush of someone's door closing far away. I swiped my keycard with fingers that finally started shaking now that no one could see me. Inside, the room was cool and dim. Heavy curtains kept the sunset out, leaving everything in that muted, expensive twilight. I set my purse on the dresser and just stood there for a second, breathing like I'd been holding my lungs hostage all day. My hands trembled harder, adrenaline finally realizing it was safe to spill. I sat on the edge of the bed. The sheets were crisp, too smooth, hotel perfect, and it made me feel even more out of place, like a messy, real person dropped into a staged life. My phone buzzed. Ava. Her message came through with an attachment and no fluff, exactly how she always handled emergencies, like feelings could wait but facts couldn't. Pulled the policy language, read the highlighted parts. They don't play with this. I opened the file. The screen filled with corporate text, cold and precise. Phrases jumped out like neon. Falsifying expense reports, misrepresentation of business purpose, conflict of interest, unapproved vendor relationships, then the consequences, written so plainly it felt brutal. Audit triggers, immediate administrative leave pending investigation, repayment demands, disciplinary action up to termination. My throat tightened. Not because I wanted him fired, not because I wanted revenge for the sake of revenge, but because this was the first language Derek couldn't charm his way through. It didn't care about his smile, his excuses, his Claire's emotional routine. It cared about dates and receipts and patterns. The room's air conditioning kicked on with a soft roar, and I realized I'd been sweating. Another buzz. Derek, you're ruining my career. That was the entire message. No, I'm sorry. No, can we talk? Just that. Like his career was the victim and I was the attacker. Like my marriage was a minor inconvenience compared to his reputation. I stared at the words until my eyes burned. My hands went cold again, not from fear this time, but from clarity. He had lied to me, used my name, spent our money, and still he was framing himself as the wounded party. I didn't reply. I opened Miles's last email thread instead, the one labeled with my name and a date stamp. It felt strange how comforting something so sterile could be. I called Miles, but he didn't answer with a casual, hello. He answered with purpose, like he'd been waiting for the next step. Claire, he said, are you in your room? Yes, I whispered, then cleared my throat. Derek's texting. Don't respond emotionally, he said immediately. No calls with him, no private meetings, everything written, everything time-stamped. If you have to speak in person, it's witnessed. His voice was calm in a way that made my spine straighten, like calm was a decision I could make too. What do we do right now? I asked. We protect you, he said. First, we file a request to freeze joint withdrawals and prevent any new debt in your name. Second, we maintain a clean record. Let him write his own threats. Let him incriminate himself with his own words. I pulled my laptop closer, the device warm against my palms, and followed his instructions. The forms were blunt and unromantic. Account numbers, dates, authorization details. I uploaded the statements, the screenshots, the second device activation notice. Each file name felt like a brick placed carefully into a wall. As I hit submit, I expected to feel dramatic. Instead, I felt quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when you stop begging someone to behave and start building a door they can't push through. Miles's final message came through seconds later. Request filed. Do not engage. Document everything. Outside my window, I could hear faint laughter from the pool area, a clink of glass, vacation life continuing like my heartbreak was irrelevant. Inside, my phone lit up again with Derek's name, hovering like a temptation. I set it face down. Today, I understand the law doesn't roar. It moves quietly, like water finding cracks, until the thing that seemed solid suddenly isn't. Jenna called just after 9, when my resort room had gone quiet enough that I could hear the air conditioning kick on and off. The lamp by the bed cast a warm circle on the sheets, but my hands were still cold. Her name flashed on my screen, and for a second, I stared at it like it might bite. Claire, she said the moment I answered. Where are you? At the resort, I replied. The one Derek said was a business trip. There was a pause, then a sharp inhale. Oh my God. I waited. I could feel her trying to choose words that didn't accuse Derek too loudly. That was always the dance with his family. Protect the image first, ask questions later. He told everyone you two were going through a phase, Jenna said finally, like normal marriage stuff. And he said you've been unstable. Unstable, the same word Derek used in different clothes. My throat tightened with that familiar humiliation, being labeled instead of listened to. So he's been telling people I'm crazy, I said flat. Claire, I didn't... Jenna's voice wobbled. He made it sound like you were accusing him of things that weren't real, like you were spiraling. I almost laughed, but it came out as a breath. Did you believe him? Silence. Then smaller. I didn't know about this. But you knew something, I said, and my voice sharpened despite my effort. Jenna, have you ever seen his business trips up close? She hesitated long enough that the answer was already yes. Once, she admitted. My stomach dropped. Explain. Jenna exhaled shakily. Last year, he called me. He said he had a last-minute work trip and there were issues with booking. He asked me to help him. Help him. Like it was picking up dry cleaning. How did you help? I asked. She swallowed, and I heard the sound through the phone. I booked flights under a friend's account, she said. Someone he knows from college. Derek said it would avoid complications with company reporting. He told me it was harmless. The confession hit in a clean, sharp way, not explosive, just precise. My chest hurt like it had been cut open with something small and careful. Betrayal always tasted the same, metallic, familiar, like biting the inside of your cheek and realizing you've done it before. Jenna rushed on, trying to patch it. Claire, I didn't think he was doing something like this. He said you guys were complicated. Then she asked, suddenly, did you do something to push him away? The question hung there, ugly and automatic, a line Derek had planted in her mouth. Jenna went quiet immediately, like she heard herself too. Oh my God, she whispered. I'm sorry, I don't know why I said that. Because it was easier to blame me than face him, I thought. Because he'd trained everyone to treat his choices like reactions to my flaws. Miles is handling things, I said, voice tight but controlled. Compliance may get involved, Jenna. If you helped him hide flights, they'll ask. Her breathing turned shallow. What do I do? You write down what you know, I said. Dates, what he asked, what you did, a statement. She sounded frightened now, trembling. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll do it. I stared at the hotel carpet, listening to her fear finally replace her loyalty. Now I understand. The lie wasn't just Derek's. It was a story he handed out, and people repeated it until the truth demanded a signature. Miles's office felt colder than the resort, lit by harsh fluorescence that made everything look clinical. The air smelled like leather, toner, and stale coffee. No comfort, just clarity. I sat across from him with my phone on the desk, palms flat to stop them from trembling. Miles slid a printed report toward me. We got the access logs, he said. The paper was warm from the printer. I stared at the lines of dates and device IDs, trying to make my brain accept what my body already knew. He tapped one entry with his pen. Second device, he said. Not yours. I leaned in. The log showed late-night logins to our shared accounts. Times I'd been asleep, times I'd been at work, times I'd been sitting next to Derek on the couch while he scrolled his phone like nothing mattered. The entries weren't vague. They were precise. Evidence dressed up as boring numbers. Miles placed another page on top. Transfers, approved, under my profile. My throat tightened. So he did it through my name, I whispered. Yes, Miles said, calm and absolute. Your credentials, your profile, your identity. The humiliation came like a delayed sting. I remembered asking Derek months ago if we could add my phone number to account alerts. He'd smiled like he was being patient with a child. Too many notifications will stress you out, he'd said. I'll handle it. Miles pointed to a section on the report. Alerts were routed only to his phone, he said. That's why you didn't see this in real time. You were blind by design. Blind by design. I swallowed hard, the words scraping on the way down. Derek hadn't just hidden things, he'd built a system where I couldn't catch him, then called me anxious when my instincts screamed anyway. A knock came at the door, and Rowan, the private investigator, stepped in. He looked forgettable on purpose, the kind of person you wouldn't notice twice. He set a folder on the desk and opened it without fanfare. I pulled business records and transfer summaries, Rowan said. There's a connection to Sloan. He slid a page across. A registry printout for a consulting LLC with a bland name and a mailbox address, clean on paper. Then another page, bank transfers tied to it. Rowan tapped the list. These payments are regular and personal, likely rent, and these charges, boutiques, furniture, hotels, don't align with legitimate business services. My stomach clenched. The resort had been a splashy lie. This was the quiet one. The kind you can live next to for months without realizing it's bleeding you out. Rowan pointed again. And these dinners, they're coded as client entertainment, but there's no corresponding client activity. I pictured Derek's calm face while he called me exhausting, his hand on my phone when he fixed our alerts, his voice saying business trip like it was a password. Miles gathered the documents into neat stacks. This is enough, he said. Enough for what? My voice sounded thin. Divorce filings, he replied. A financial restraining order to block new debt and protect your accounts, and a compliance report package. Timelines, policies, transactions, and supporting logs. He slid a draft toward me. Seeing petition for dissolution of marriage at the top made my chest tighten, but underneath the pain was something steady. Direction. Rowan closed his folder and stood. The trail is loud, he said quietly, even if they pretend it isn't. I stared at my name on the pages, the shield he used while he lived a second life. Now I understand the second device wasn't just a tool. It was the doorway into who Derek really was when he thought I couldn't see. The compliance conference room smelled like black coffee and copier paper, sterile enough to make emotions feel inappropriate. Harsh fluorescence buzzed overhead, flattening everyone's faces into something tired and honest. Mr. Voss sat at the end of a long table with a laptop open and a stack of documents aligned so neatly it looked like he'd measured the edges. Derek walked in wearing his best suit and his best mask. Polished hair, calm smile, the posture of a man who believed he could talk himself out of anything. Sloane followed, dressed conservative and soft, eyes wide with curated innocence. Miles sat beside me, quiet and steady. I kept my hands folded, nails pressing into my palms to keep my body from shaking. Mr. Voss didn't do small talk. "We'll begin," he said, voice flat. He clicked, and the screen behind him lit up with a timeline. Dates, transaction IDs, policy codes. It didn't look like a marriage falling apart. It looked like a case. "Mr. Morgan," Mr. Voss said, "we're reviewing expense submissions and vendor relationships tied to your corporate card over the last 12 months. Derek smiled, professional. "Of course. There's been a lot of confusion. I'm happy to clarify." Mr. Voss held up a resort folio with the logo crisp at the top. This reservation was submitted as client entertainment. Provide the client name and business purpose. Derek didn't flinch at first. "Networking," he said smoothly. "A potential partner. Informal meetings." Mr. Voss lifted a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "Name." Derek blinked. "I'd have to check." "We did," Mr. Voss replied, and clicked again. A list appeared. Derek's client entertainment entries compared to the company client database. No matches, no notes, no CRM records. Blank. Derek cleared his throat and tried his oldest move. He angled his body slightly toward me, voice calm but pointed. "My wife is emotional," he said. "She's upset and she's—" It landed like an old joke in a room that didn't laugh. No one looked at me. No one softened toward him. Mr. Voss didn't even blink. "We're not discussing emotions," Mr. Voss said. "We're discussing policy." Something in my chest loosened. Derek's favorite weapon didn't work here. Mr. Voss flipped to another page. "Contractor payments," he said. "Transfers to a consulting LLC you submitted as professional services." Sloane's posture stiffened. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Mr. Voss read the LLC name aloud and looked directly at her. "Ms. Lane, are you affiliated with this entity?" Sloane glanced at Derek, quick and pleading. He stared at the table like his eyes could erase the paper. "I do consulting," she said carefully. "It's legitimate." "Then you can provide invoices, scope, and deliverables," Mr. Voss replied. "Because we have none." He clicked again. A spreadsheet filled the screen, amounts, dates, patterns, transfers that looked like rent, boutique charges, hotels, a rhythm that didn't resemble business at all. Derek's jaw tightened. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, charm fraying. "You're acting like I committed fraud over dinners and—" "Audit trigger," Mr. Voss said, calm as a machine. "Conflict of interest, misrepresentation." Then he folded his hands. "Effective immediately, you are placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Your accounts will be audited. Repayment will be required. Certain matters may be referred for further review." Derek's mouth opened, then closed. Sloane's innocent posture collapsed into panic because the paper trail didn't care what story she'd been told. I watched from the side, calm and distant, realizing the system was doing what my emotions couldn't, forcing truth into daylight. Now I understand karma doesn't always scream. Sometimes it's a quiet voice saying, "Administrative leave," and a liar running out of charm. The mediation room felt smaller than it should have, like the walls had leaned in to listen. Beige carpet, a long laminate table, a pitcher of water sweating onto a paper coaster. No windows, just fluorescent light and the faint smell of disinfectant, like the room had been scrubbed of drama on purpose. Derek sat across from me, shoulders tight, hands clasped too carefully. He looked smaller here, not physically, but stripped of the spaces where he performed best. No audience, no charm to deploy, no way to tilt the story with a laugh. Miles sat beside me, composed, a thin folder open in front of him, numbers tabbed, exhibits labeled, reality organized. The mediator explained the process in a neutral voice, but Derek barely listened. His eyes kept drifting to me, searching for something. Sympathy, nostalgia, the old reflex where I'd soften if he sounded wounded enough. "I never meant for this to happen," Derek said finally, leaning forward. His voice dropped into that familiar register, the one he used late at night when he wanted forgiveness without consequences. "I was lonely." The word landed like an insult. Lonely, as if loneliness were a permit, as if I hadn't been in the same marriage, sleeping inches away from him while he built another life with my name attached to it. I felt the urge to laugh, sharp and ugly, but I swallowed it. I stared at the condensation sliding down my water glass instead, grounding myself in something real. Miles didn't react emotionally. He didn't sigh or roll his eyes. He simply adjusted a page and spoke. "Loneliness isn't relevant to the financial facts," he said calmly. "We're here to address misuse of marital funds, unauthorized access to accounts, and asset protection moving forward." Derek bristled. "I paid everything back," he snapped. "I told you." Miles slid a document across the table. "Partial repayments after discovery don't negate misuse," he said, "and they don't erase exposure created under my client's profile." Derek's mouth opened, then closed. He glanced at the mediator like he expected rescue. Instead, the mediator nodded toward Miles. "Let's stay with the numbers." That was when Derek tried something else. He looked at me directly, eyes glassy now, voice softer. "Claire, please," he said. "You know I'm not a bad person." It was a small humiliation, watching him reach for my emotional labor one last time. Like my job was still to validate his character while he negotiated what he'd cost me. I didn't respond. Miles did. "Intent isn't the issue," he said. "Impact is." He referenced the compliance findings, administrative leave, audit results, repayment demands. He referenced Jenna's written statement, dates and details laid out without drama, the flight booked under a friend's account, the pattern of concealment. Each point shaved another layer off Derek's favorite defense, plausible deniability. There was none left. Derek's shoulders slumped as the room slowly stopped bending around him. He tried bargaining instead, smaller offers, softer promises. "I'll do therapy," he said. "I'll make it right. Miles held up a hand, not unkindly. "This isn't a reconciliation meeting." The settlement terms were read aloud, one by one, clinical and clean. Financial separation effective immediately. Repayment schedule tied to documented misuse. No new debt in my name. No access to shared accounts. No retaliation clauses. No interference. No creative loopholes disguised as apologies. Each term landed quietly like a door closing somewhere I couldn't see but could feel. Derek nodded through it all, the fight draining out of him as he realized there was nothing left to negotiate but time. He signed with a hand that shook just enough to be noticeable. When it was my turn, I picked up the pen and felt how light it was, how heavy the paper was. I signed without looking at him. As we stood to leave, Derek spoke again, softer now, almost childlike. "I never thought you'd go this far." I met his eyes for the first time in that room. "I never thought you'd make me need to." Outside, the hallway smelled like carpet cleaner and stale air. My footsteps sounded louder than they had going in. Today, I understand the settlement didn't make him small out of revenge. It made him small because the truth finally fit the room, and he didn't. I walked through the resort lobby one last time with my suitcase rolling behind me, its wheels clicking softly over stone. The air smelled the same as it had the first day, citrus and polished wood, something bright and artificial meant to suggest ease. Around me, life continued without hesitation. A family laughed near the elevators. A couple argued quietly about sunscreen. A bellhop pushed a cart stacked with luggage like this was just another morning. No one looked at me twice. That was the strangest part. The world didn't pause for heartbreak. It didn't mark the spot where a marriage ended. It just kept moving, smooth and indifferent, like the fountain in the center of the lobby whispering to itself. I stopped briefly near the seating area to adjust the strap of my bag. The leather was worn in places from years of use. Airports, weekends away, ordinary life. I thought about how many times Derek had told me I was anxious when I packed too carefully, dramatic when I double-checked plans, too much when I asked questions he didn't want to answer. Those words floated up now, thin and hollow. Anxious, dramatic, too much. I waited for them to sting the way they used to. They didn't. They felt outdated, like labels on a box that no longer belonged to me. I had asked questions because something was wrong. I had pushed because truth resists silence. If that made me too much, then too much had saved me. At the front desk, a clerk smiled and asked if I needed help with checkout. Her tone was light, professional. She didn't know me. She didn't know what this place had held for me. And I liked that. "I'm all set," I said, because I was. The final paperwork had been filed before dawn. Miles had emailed confirmation while the sky outside my window was still gray. The financial freeze held, alerts rerouted, accounts separated, my credit protected, my name finally untangled from someone else's choices. Quiet justice. Real justice. The kind that didn't need witnesses or applause. As I turned toward the doors, I saw Sloane near the coffee bar. She was standing too straight, stirring a cup she wasn't drinking. When her eyes flicked toward me, they widened for half a second. Recognition, calculation. And then she looked away quickly, like avoiding eye contact could erase consequences. Her confidence had changed. It hadn't disappeared, but it had curdled into caution. The ease she'd worn by the pool was gone, replaced with something tighter, more careful. She finally understood that charm doesn't outrun paperwork, that receipts are patient. I didn't acknowledge her. I didn't need to. Outside, the sun was already high, warming the pavement, glinting off windshields. As the valet brought my car around, my phone buzzed once in my pocket. A news alert forwarded by Ava. A bland headline about an executive placed on leave pending investigation. No name splashed across tabloids. No gossip. Just process. That was Derek's real punishment. His image didn't crack because of rumors or drama. It cracked because compliance doesn't care how likable you are. It cracked in boardrooms and emails and audit trails, places where his smile had no jurisdiction. I slid into the driver's seat and took a breath before starting the engine. For the first time in weeks, my chest felt clear. Not light, clear. Like a room after smoke has finally been pulled out. As I pulled away from the resort, I glanced once in the rearview mirror. The building receded quickly, already shrinking into something that no longer held me. Today I know betrayal thrives in secrecy. Now I understand the moment I walked up to his lover with my lawyer wasn't just confrontation, it was me choosing truth over permission.